Tobias, it is extraordinary to hear the account from your colleague, from Mike Freer, about the ordeal, frankly, that he's been through ever since he was elected to Parliament. Just how prevalent is that sort of feeling amongst your colleagues?
Yeah, it's very much there. Everybody's conscious of it. Let me just begin by just saying, I understand why Mike has stepped back. It's a tough decision to make, but when you're subject to death threats, when you've had your office set on fire, and as you saw in that interview, Mike is one of the most mild-mannered MPs. He's so friendly and engaging, diligent and committed, current Justice Minister. And we all now know that he narrowly avoided confrontation with Harbour Ali, the British national who went on to murder Sir David Amess in October 2021. It just shines a light on MP security, and not just the MP, but the families as well. And we do need to get a grip of the daily diet of hate that is via social media that is thrown at MPs and parliamentarians and those in public life, as well as those very real threats that occasionally are then followed through. There's no doubt the rising tensions in the Middle East has woken up dormant extremist networks across the region, but also here in the UK. And I'm aware that intelligence agencies here in the UK are very concerned about reinvigorated homegrown extremism here in Britain.
Tobias, do you ever feel fear for your safety, for your family's safety?
All the time. It's now, partly because of my military background and so on, you are trained to sort of look at the wider situation, become aware of where the exits are, where the pinch points might be, the vulnerabilities and so forth, what you might do. Sadly, because of various events that have happened in my life, my brother was killed. He was just a teacher. He was in the wrong place, murdered in Bali. I'm afraid I now live and breathe it all the time, very conscious that this is the horrible world that we're in. But as you're hearing from Mike there as well, there needs to be a wider debate, because otherwise ever fewer people will step forward to consider a role in public life. And that's a detriment to our country. We want good people to stay forward, to step up.
Tobias, is it time that the Prime Minister stood up and delivered a speech to the nation about this? Because seeing our elected politicians intimidated in this way out of public office is shocking, and it shows a sign of a democracy potentially at threat from extremists.
Well, it isn't just the Prime Minister. I think it's all leaders, but it's also what do we do? What are the practical measures that we take? Because as Mike was alluding to as well, every time this is in the public domain, such as we're discussing now, there's a lot of condemnation, but not enough happens. We need to be far swifter in being able to report and deal with social media and email abuse, to make any individual think twice about sending such hate. We saw improvements made to MP security after Joe Cox was sadly killed, but they still don't go far enough. And it's also worth pointing out, I would say, that the internet has taken over, indeed overshadows the pulpit in a mosque. There will always be a steady flow of misguided people who, with scant knowledge of the Quran, will be persuaded to leave a trail of destruction in this life, expected to be rewarded in the next, or indeed want to cause harm in some way. The internet is that double-edged sword, and I'm afraid we've failed to blunt one side of it.
It is fascinating to hear you talk about whenever this pops up into the public conversation. It reminds us of the awful murder of Sir David Amess, of Joe Cox, but also of Stephen Timms, who was stabbed by an Islamic extremist, and of John Mann, who saw his car tampered with too. It seems that this keeps happening, and perhaps too readily this slips from our minds and exits the general conversation.
It does indeed. And as I say, if we want Britain to be that open, tolerant place, it has to absolutely include those who step forward in public life. I want to see the best of Britons wanting to participate and play a role in our parliamentary democracy. We will not see that if we don't look after those who are in public life. And when we see somebody as wonderful as Mike making the decision to say, my family understandably comes first, we clearly need to do more. These are dangerous times, there's no doubt about it. And Britain does need to then craft the atmosphere and the environment that makes sure that we are safe and we stamp out this sort of behavior. As I say, a lot of this, and Mike touched on it, is related to the internet, the responsibility and utility of the digital domain, which we still are far from understanding and appreciating.
Yes, I just worry that we all want to live in a tolerant society, but perhaps we're too tolerant of extremism too. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Tobias Ellwood, Conservative MP, of course.